Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Friday, which means it's time for a new how to bass tutorial. And today I'm going to show you how to make this sound. This is a fun one. It involves oscillator sync and a bunch of relatively normal things, with one kind of special thing going on here, but it comes out to being not that intense, but it's, as you can tell, it makes a somewhat unique sound, so it's kind of neat. This confusing looking bullshit is mostly just there so that I can properly automate things. I probably could have done that in a smarter way, but I apparently elected not to. So, in the beginning, there's this guy. He ain't doing much, but let's listen to what he sounds like by himself because it's kind of important. This is essentially creating the modulator. This is what's going into the vocal decks and coming under the modulation side, which means that it's affecting itself onto the carrier. The carrier is this dude, and this dude is the oscillator synced SAW FM thing business, which sounds like that. And that was achieved just by being a bunch of unison with no phase, so we get that kind of clicky hit in the beginning there. And it is a saw wave being oscillated by a saw wave, which is being oscillated by a saw wave, all at root level. This is actually a trick that's based on something that Virtual Riot showed me one time, which is the idea that you oscillate the, it's actually a serum trick where you oscillate operator 1 by oscillator 1 by oscillator 2, oscillator A by oscillator B, and you FMB from B using a saw wave, and then you sync the warp mode with the warp mode, the sync warp mode with B, and you modulate both the two of them. And the thing is that FMing something by a saw wave and using oscillator sync are almost the same thing. There are slight differences, but they basically create more or less the same result. So in Citrus, we can mimic this by having oscillating a saw wave by a saw wave by another saw wave. And so we're getting kind of this cascading oscillator synced thing going on. Virtual Riot's example was by having the second oscillator being an octave higher, but in this case, it's working out to being just the regular bass level tone. And that's all that this guy is. This is just a sub that's coming at the very end where it's being high passed, and then coming together with the sub into the limiter, just to be limited. But the modulator here is the thing that's a little bit interesting. So, the modulator by itself, not too much cool, going on there. There's some interesting kind of FM shenanigans. This triangle wave looks like it's sort of bent towards the saw side a little bit, being oscillated. This is an octave higher. Okay, I remember what I was doing with this now. So, operator 3 is the regular tone, and then operator 1 is an octave higher. So it's like the harmonic content is actually an octave higher than the root. And then there's just different kinds of FM to kind of create the motion, and then the motion is created by this off-pitched ratio. So we get that kind of Reese relationship there. And well, not a lot was really paid attention to this particular sound, because what's happening to it is what's creating the actual kind of the modulator that we're actually using. And that's these two guys. So these are really, really thin band passes that are being independently modulated. And that's what all this automation's about. This automation's about creating one control that moves one of them up and the other one down, so you get that kind of talky yo-yo effect business. And then a second automation on the same thing to change the bass level so that you can change where they meet and where they open up to, that whole thing. That's what the two main automation points here. Modulation X is controlling the open and closing, and modulation Y is controlling where it opens and closes to. And then this envelope controller configuration is just a method of getting that to be a thing. If you've never used the envelope controller, the way this works is that there's 8 different articulators. However, there's still just one X and Y. So 1 and 2, they're both mod X mapping. So when I move mod X, it's moving both of these. And then there's the bass level, there's how much intensity and all that kind of good stuff. So then the bass level, I activated that as a controller, and that's being linked to this other controller, which is just the same thing. And this mod X is just controlling the other mod X. And then the mod Y is controlling, mod Y is controlling that, and then mod X is controlling, yeah, there you go. So number 1 is mod Y, number 2 is mod X. Mod Y is controlling the base level position in Mod X is controlling Mod X. It's literally just the Mod X wheel that's coming out there. So it's like Mod X is Mod Xing itself. It's it's weird, and like I said, there's probably a smarter way to do that, but whatever, got the job done. The last Mod X control down here is the oscillator sync on the carrier. It's just the FM intensity of everything together. Now, as far as this guy is going on, this is Bandpass and Bandpass, and they're both going into distortion. So they're both being distorted really hard from the really hard bandpass. And does that kind of stuff against the other guy. That the whole point of doing this with the distortion is that it allows you to sort of create more interesting harmonic content, because if it was just, you know, the cut here together, then it wouldn't really do a lot. But with a distortion, it creates additional harmonic content when it works together into the vocodex is used to control the overall tone of everything. I actually hadn't heard what that sounded like by itself until now, because I just put it into the vocodex and worked on it that way. Let's also talk about the wave shaper for a second, because this is the first time anyone's seen me use it since the new FL12, and you can do this now. And this is just the coolest shit in the universe, because this allows you to do much more specific things, very tight control changes that would have been absolutely impossible to do with the regular wave shape size, which was like over here somewhere. So that's what that's freaking cool for. You can just, that's just the best. I'm so very pleased that that's a thing now. Yeah. And so then the two of these are going into vocodex. You don't need to be here. All right. So input 1 is the modulator, input 2 is the carrier. I've turned off all the contour settings. They actually do things to their dry inputs. So when you merge them in there, when you merge them in there, they kind of react appropriately to the rest of the content. But I didn't want anything doing anything, so that's why I'm not doing that at all. So don't have the sound goodizer engaged. The wet's only a little bit louder, so it's just doing that. Have 100 voices, 100 bands, but I use my band distribution to push it up pretty hard like this, which creates that particular distribution of bands instead of it being an even distribution, which gets us so that we have more bands in the lows and or less bands on the lows and more bands on the high. Now, I actually usually when I do vocodex stuff, I want to avoid the thin band sounding kind of glassy business, which is happening over here. But actually, it complemented the sound quite well. If you don't know what I'm talking about this. When the bandwidth is too thin, we get that very pipey sounding organ, almost glass, just a bunch of words that don't mean anything. You saw what it sounded like, so now you know what it sounds like. But I try to avoid that usually in some things. But this a particular part of the spectrum, which is nice that we can do this. We can change bandwidth at a per band basis. Bandwidth at a per band basis. Say that 3 times fast. And allows us to sort of sculpt the sound to be that particular coolest. In the modulator pitch shift, I literally just went up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, with the points putting down, and then grabbed the point and moved it around until it sounded kind of like what I wanted it to. And what I wanted it to sound like was awesome. It wasn't really a goal for that. Literally just put it on and then... just kind of moving around so it sounds like something neat. Really what this is doing is, much like the bandwidth, this is allowing us to change the pitch. And the way that pitch works with vocoders is that it reads an input at that band's location. So it says how much level is at that band at that location, and it turns on the corresponding band on the carrier. That's how it imprints the modulation's sort of spectral sound to the carrier. So if the pitch were higher or lower on the modulator, that would mean that the band that gets activated would be higher or lower. So while you can literally change the pitch of the source by doing that, you can also change the pitch's influence. You can say, okay, well, if it would have moved this band, let's have it move the other band instead. And that's what this sort of change does. It's saying that like whatever pitch information exists here gets pushed up, and then push down. And there's a whole lot of different kinds of interaction and relationship that happens when you start changing stuff around like this. But it does handy things. Like, for example, on the high level, the high bands, I actually pushed these way up because when I didn't do that, there's almost no high frequency information. So now we're saying all that stuff, that motioning is getting transposed essentially and put up higher, which is neat. And then of course there's the global pitch shift change. So there's a lot of neatness you can do with that. Slightly lower than usual. Slightly higher, longer than usual release time, which gives us essentially decay on the bands. Shortness gives you this sort of a little bit more, and then longer gets you more. So I wanted a little bit of that in there. And then, yeah, that's pretty much covers all the important stuff going on in there. And then it gets compressed. And this is mostly just to even things out. I didn't really try very hard to do anything on this. It was just make it even and louder. And then a little bit of EQ, high pass to kick out the sub, and then a sub replacement with just a sine wave. Well, I think about it. Let's beef it up a bit. And then a limiter to make sure it doesn't go above 0 dB, because why not? I think I pushed up a tiny bit. Yeah, the gain is up a little bit. Turning the attack off so that doesn't delay the audio too much more than it would have already been delayed because of this. And then that's the sound. That's all that's happening. Relatively simple. All the individual stuff is pretty simple when you think about it, but like it's all comes together in a way that you may not have thought about. And I do kind of enjoy this. But actually, let's talk about the automation, because this is pretty important in terms of getting it to feel the way that this does at the moment. So these two are the ones that are controlling the band passes in those two separate distortion chains, and that's just moving stuff around. And they're not going anywhere other than I just put them down in such a way that it sounds the way they do. And I thought that sounded cool. I didn't really put them there because I knew it was going to sound cool. I moved things around until it sounded good. However, there are some things going on with the oscillator sync stuff that it's kind of important. So, for example, right in the beginning, like this hit is happening because the oscillation isn't moving very far. Because if it does move, but if I say it's still at any level, then it has that sort of static, even sound. Same idea here. This is lower, but still stays kind of together. And then a little bit with this curve as well. So like the less it's moving, the sharper it sounds. And the more that it moves, the more kind of uncertain and cloudy it sounds. Again, describing things that you just heard for yourself, so I really don't need to do that. And that's all that kind of neat stuff. So yeah, that's this sound. This FLP will be available to download in the description of this video. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.